Your secret is not safe with me, myself, and I, the podcast where we uncover your alter egos. A bookish Gen Zer by day and a sarcastic stand-up comic by night, I, Corinna, am no stranger to embodying a character if it means I can make vulnerable confessions about my life. I mean, I'd do anything for a laugh. But here, your hidden personalities take center stage as we get to know the real yous. Discover how we can stay true to ourselves with help from our different selves. This episode is brought to you by a canceled show that I had. It was a show at a club that I loved going to called Astronaut City in Arcadia, and they had this signature show called New Joke City, where comics had to come with no prepared material, and instead they had to riff off and improvise on a topic that I believe was either drawn out of a hat or suggested by the audience. I got the booking offer about a month and a half before the scheduled show, and right off the bat, I was very nervous about it, mostly because I've never thought of myself as an improviser when it comes to comedy. I remember trying to be one when I got really into SNL in high school, and then freshman year of college, I got rejected by both the improv and the sketch groups, which just reaffirmed to me that stand-up comes more naturally to me. But I remember auditioning for those groups and trying to pull a Kristen Wiig and do those very big, ridiculous things. But, that's the thing, is that there was only one Kristen Wiig. So, why was I out here trying to copy someone that I wasn't? Well, it's a very normal thing to emanate someone that you admire, no matter what field you're in. But especially in the case of stand-up, I think it's a natural part of your journey towards finding your own comedic voice. And stand-up is obviously a very vulnerable art form, and a joke only works if it's being told by someone who is speaking their truth. So for instance, Jimmy Carr, a British comic known for his one-liners, he can't really deliver material written by Ali Wong, who's very frank about what it's like to be an Asian woman and a mother. So obviously, they have very different comedic voices that are very specific to their identities. And the only stand-up comedy class I've taken was about finding your comedic voice, which is the next big hurdle you've got to tackle once you've figured out joke structure and basic things like that. But that class really emphasized that in order for an audience to be invested in your point of view and laugh with you, they have to know who you are and why you have those perspectives in the first place. That's why if you look at a lot of comedians' early work, it's very specific to their identity and their life story. So with that in mind, I almost always start off my set talking about my adoption from China, growing up in a Chinese American household with two professor parents. Obviously, just by looking at me, they can tell I'm an Asian woman. But when the audience learns about the people who raised me and the values that I grew up under, they can understand why I dress a certain way, why I'm more cynical or particular about various everyday things than someone whose parents are both DJs or something. And by the way, I do know someone whose parents are both DJs, and you can probably guess that she also wears polos and is a hypochondriac. No, I'm kidding. So when it comes to the topics that I cover on stage, there is a version of myself that's being presented, and it's based on fact and, it's slightly exaggerated. But the way that I talk about those topics, the comedic lens through which I present those topics, that's something that came from a mix of just my natural intuition and my own sense of humor, and also a desire to replicate someone else's voice. So yeah, the first time I ever performed stand-up comedy was in my high school talent show, and I don't think I had a particular comic that I was trying to embody, because I think it was because I was trying something new for the first time and I was the only person doing stand-up comedy. So, I didn't really have another desire to stand out. I was like, okay, this is going to be cool and unique either way. But I had the basics of joke structure down from just random stand-ups I'd grown up watching, but there wasn't anyone in particular that I needed to copy. And that was the same even when I was performing in stand-up in college. I stuck to the type of humor that I liked, which was and still is roast humor, self-deprecation, observation. And I think it also helps that we didn't perform that often, so I had plenty of time to just think about what I wanted to say, and there wasn't this pressure to, bring something new or something that was super concrete. But then also that's the thing about stand-up, is that it's really about always working on your craft, always refining, always polishing, and just trying something new and not being afraid to completely bomb. But now I've gotten to a point where I have stage time all the time, whether it's an open mic or a book show. And it could be anywhere from once a week to 3 times a week. It's really up to me. But the further you get in your career, the longer the sets you get to perform. So, you normally start off with like 5 minutes, and 5 minutes is considered a long time when you're first starting out. And then once you have a lot more material, you're like, oh, this sucks. I only have 5 minutes on stage. Like, you really need to make sure that you're cramming in your material, but making good use of the time and making sure that it's still flowing in a cohesive and succinct way. So that means you really have to be writing when you are having opportunities for you to be on stage for longer periods of time. And I don't really have the discipline to sit and try to write out a bit. Like, most of my material comes from something funny happening to me, or I say something funny in a conversation and then I write it down and I figure out how to fit that into my overall act. But funnily enough, the times that I get a lot of my writing done are either when I am about to go to bed and I'm like, oh my God, I need to come up with some material for a show that I have. Or it's I'm like driving in the car and something pops into my head, but I can't pull out my phone and write in my notes app. So what I do is I do Siri dictation. Apologies for anyone whose phone just got activated. But basically, I have Siri send a message to my friend Lauren, and I say, I'm riding in the car again. I'm having Siri dictate my joke, and then I'll send Lauren some joke. And it's usually something stupid like tag for boobs joke, and then I never end up telling that on stage. So apologies to Lauren, but shout out also for putting up with all my bullshit and taking all these weird, inappropriate messages while you're probably like at church and I'm just, writing butt jokes. But I am trying to challenge myself to crank out more material because that's what TV writers do. Like, sometimes it's easy to come up with a premise, then fit it into a particular joke structure and punchline. But other times I can't figure out the angle. And that's when my comedy alter egos come out. And the biggest comedic influence on me is Nikki Glaser. When I was in high school, she had done the roast of Alec Baldwin and Bruce Willis. And already I remember thinking how smart and edgy and punchy her jokes were. And I just remember I wanted to be like that. So if there's a joke that I think can have a bit of edge to it, I try to think of how Nikki would say it. I remember seeing a promo for Alec Baldwin and Ilaria's reality show one time, and I wrote a joke in Nikki Glaser style that was like, Alec Baldwin and his wife Ilaria have 8 children together. And I always thought that was weird because I thought the whole point of getting with a woman 20 years younger than you was because she still had a tight pussy. So, obviously Nikki Glaser can come up with something way better than that, but I feel like the spirit of the joke is something similar to what she would touch on. And when I was writing that joke and whenever I deliver that joke, I do imagine myself as Nikki Glaser at a roast dais, delivering that joke. I also like to experiment with political humor on Instagram. Follow me at CORINNAYEET if you haven't already. Because those videos give you the option to just display an image in the background, and I'll usually put a news headline in the back and then still try to have some sort of like punchy, quick joke. But because there's an image displayed behind me and I don't have to do too much verbal setup, I think of those jokes more as what Colin Jost or Michael Che would say on SNL's Weekend Update. So even though the jokes are still aligning with my perspective and it's something that I would say and joke about in my everyday life, it helps me to get in a very particular headspace for both writing and delivery if I picture myself having to, say those jokes in a very concise way, straight down the barrel of the camera. And it also helps that I dress kind of preppy, so that also helps me to imagine myself at the Weekend Update desk. But there are jokes that I also tell on stage that I still think would be in the Weekend Update style. Like, I have one joke that basically goes, did you know that North Korea has a marathon? Yeah, hundreds of foreigners fly to Pyongyang to run in this thing. And in today's world, I can't think of anything more stupid than running 26 miles. But if there is anything that's gonna make me run that distance, it's the sound of a gun going off in North Korea. Apologies, I haven't gotten that one on tape yet, but hey, that's just another reason for you to come see me live. So yeah, for that one, especially I think because it's a world event, but also requires very clear, sobering delivery, and that's like slightly exasperated, I like to think of imagining myself at the update desk for that one, especially when it comes to, that gun line. But now going back to the improvised show, I'm not really one to do crowd work or improvise, so I really wanted to challenge myself for this one. I feel like whenever I have like a witty comeback, it usually doesn't come to me until like 3 hours later when I'm in the car and I'm like, damn it, I should have said that. And I remember even in middle school, my friends and I, we came up with a term for that like phenomenon, I guess, where you have like a very delayed comeback that you think of. We called it, I think, Franz fin. So I'm Franz finning all the time. I'm like, damn it, why didn't I say that? Like, people would probably think I'm so cool, but no, I have no riz. So I really wanted to challenge myself. The truth is, I don't riff a lot on stage because I'm not 100% relaxed. And when I step on stage, even though I'm not telling late night style jokes, I feel like I'm delivering a late night monologue in the sense that I feel like I've got to present myself and my material very clearly. And I need to have a certain level of composure and formality. I think some of that has to do with just the way that I look. Obviously, your stand up and your material, that's when you get to really reveal yourself. But you also have to be aware that when the audience is getting a first impression of you as soon as you step on that stage. So whether or not I identify as like, some uptight librarian looking person, obviously some of that I think is true, but it's like, I know that that's what the audience is perceiving. And sometimes that works to my advantage because, they look at me and they think I'm a goody two shoes. And then all of a sudden I'm joking about, my sex life or my love for alcohol. So it does work to that, but you have to be aware of what the audience is expecting from you. And then that's when you can start having a bit of fun of them and either verifying their expectations of you or subverting them. And I think that's part of why I don't really engage in audience interaction too much, because I think I would be too in my head of trying to figure out, what are they expecting of me? And then how can I play into that image, but at the same time also juggle, adding my own voice. And so really, I think that's just a matter of, again, being comfortable on stage and understanding that like where a lot of humor comes from is that as long as I'm myself, people will eventually start to understand my story and my voice, and I don't have to have all this formal setup and punchline for them. So really, I think it's about playing everything loose and just being comfortable in your own skin. And that's something that I have to get better at, because the times that I'm at my funniest, and a lot of times when I have a lot of jokes that are written out of interactions, it's because I'm interacting with my friends and I'm very relaxed and I'm in a casual environment. And getting relaxed on stage, that takes a lot of practice, and I'm slowly getting better at it. But one way that I tried to expedite that process and get ready for that improvised stand-up show is by listening to Conan O'Brien's podcast and watching some of his TBS show, which I loved as a kid. Like, he's someone who is so good at playing and taking things farther. And he is the embodiment of that yes and mentality of improv comedy. Yet he still has this character that he puts on of what I would describe as like goofily disgruntled. And obviously I think that is a version of himself that's very true, which is why he's so comfortable in that quote unquote character. And I've always been really good at picking up people's mannerisms or cadences, which is why I think I was trying to like, I guess, method act or expose myself and, just try to soak in him as much as possible. And I remember like when I was a kid, one of my party tricks was that I would imitate the sound of different languages without saying any actual words. And my dad loved it. I'm like not good at it anymore, but I remember like for French, I'd be like, like, so it was like shit like that. But I took the same approach to just trying to get Conan in my ear so that when the show came around, I could have a sort of anchor to cling to for the moments that I didn't feel relaxed. Because I know in those moments I tend to freeze, but if I know like, I just have to put on my Conan avatar. But spoiler alert, as we know, that show never happened. So who knows what would have played out. Maybe I would have crushed, or maybe I would have quit comedy. So either way, again, it goes into my idea that everything happens for a reason. Everything happens when it's supposed to. But I'd like to think God was sparing me in that moment. But I will say that during my most recent shows, I have definitely felt more loose and comfortable to play around on stage. And I'm not necessarily trying to imitate anyone during those moments, but I do think that reintroducing myself to the comedians that I love unlocked something in me, and it gave me permission to play, which is why I got into comedy in the first place. So after this, I would love to hear who in your life is your rock and who do you try to emanate for challenging situations, whether it's a celebrity or, your next door neighbor, which could also be a celebrity. Like, I live in California, you never know. But, like when we were kids, they would take you to the doctor and you're about to get a shot and they'd be like, you're brave, you can be brave just like Batman or Kim Possible or something like that. And we'd be like, yeah, I can do it just like them. And it's because we saw ourselves in them, or we saw something that we wanted to be in them. So I'm curious, like, who is that for you? And if you feel so inclined, I'd love to hear from you. please leave a comment in this podcast or message me on my Instagram at CORINNAYEET, and maybe we can delve into that further. So thank you so much for listening to my comedy crash out, my comedy process and story. I hope that this was interesting for you, because I think a lot of people, we watch stand-up comedy, especially on social media, it's become more visible nowadays, but people don't really understand how we get there and what the process is. And everyone's process obviously is different. It's making me cringe saying this, but that is my way of working on my craft. And so if there is a takeaway from this, I think it's that, again, like the theme of this podcast, we all have alter egos that we sometimes need to ground ourselves. And, it's not necessarily hiding. It's just a way to convince ourselves that we are capable of tackling those challenges. And also, don't be afraid to play. Play pretend, play a character, and just, be like Conan O'Brien. Just keep yes-anding. Hey, thanks for joining me, myself, and I for a terrific episode. I hope you had as much fun as I did and even made a friend or two. If you want to stay up to date on future episodes and laugh even more, follow me on Instagram at CORINNAYEET. Talk to you and your other self soon.